ladies, I'm so happy to be here and welcome everybody to this amazing webinar. And thank you for joining Women for Solutions. We are proud to present our 164th Women for Solution webinar, where we create awareness, connect, we talk, we learn, we inspire to action, to regenerate, to reimagine, and to make our world a better place. I'm Laura Jaduru Koch, founder of Women for Solution, a global network of thousands of women and men entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of more than 40 countries, where we share simple and effective scalable solutions towards a caring economy. Today, we have two amazing speakers, passionate about what we're going to talk about, that is Mary Magdalene, historic context, and Jesus Christ. I know this is not about religion. This is about facts, the truth of what happened more than 2,000 years ago. Both of them are dear friends and also board members of Women for Solutions. Teresa Egaña is a transformational speaker and mentor of feminine in leadership and adventure and nurture lover. She's a psychologist, a professional breath worker, systematic constellation, and non-flick coach, as the three of us are, and several in the line also. She's a focus on, she started, and that's how I met her, this amazing journey for hundreds of women called Lecturas Arquetipales, where she talks and reads about these amazing books that inspire women to change, to transform. And she has dedicated many of these talks about Mary Magdalene. And our second speaker is Ellie Ingraham, CEO of Center for Partnership Solutions, founded by Riane Eisler, our very well-known Riane Eisler, who started the concept of a caring economy more than 40 years ago. Ellie was formerly CEO of Sager Family Foundation, and previously she was Taya Global Artisan, focused on alleviating poverty among African textile weavers. What most people don't know about Ellie was she's an ordained minister in life and studies sacred text and literature for more than 12 years. That's why she is the deal like Tere about this. So we are going to be, this is the first in a series of 3 webinars about the historic context of Mary Magdalene, what happened then, and the impact that Mary Magdalene had during her life and today, up to today, for 2,000 years later. So on that note, please, ladies, take the stand.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of your day to join us. What started as a conversation, a spontaneous conversation with the 3 of us, really sort of resulted in this. We realized a common love and interest and curiosity around Mary Magdalene and thought we might have a broader conversation. And so thank you for joining us. I thought it was personally really important before we got into Mary Magdalene, the person, the Gospel of Mary, and her relationship with Jesus, was to give you a historic context that I think really leads up to why they were where they were, who they were, what they believed, why they lived where they lived. And so that's what I'm going to try to do, is to cover about 3,000 years of humanity in about 15 minutes. It's a little bit daunting, but heck, you know, let's go for it. So the fight for the soul of humanity has been fought on the battleground of religion and spirituality. The war particularly has been between patriarchal monotheism and partnership-based polytheism. Polytheism is what embraced the feminine, the equally divine, equally powerful, equally engaged feminine. And so before we can talk about Mary Magdalene as one of the co-founders of the Christian movement with Jesus, or Yeshua as he was known back then, I think we first have to look at the historical context of the Israelites, or the Jews. Back then, religion, spirituality, and politics, even more than today, were completely intertwined. and they were extremely fluid because old world cultures collided. They shared, they took from one another, they fought over things. But what happened was the narratives that were passed down to us, like most of history, reflect really the stories of the winners, the ones who prevailed, the ones who dominated. And that's what we really have to kind of keep in mind, particularly as new evidence kind of emerges. We have to remember that back then, you know, there was no written canon at the time. There was no one set of definitive beliefs. And the practice of oral tradition, you can imagine what kind of game of telephone probably played out with that over thousands of years. And even when things were written down, it's very clear. First of all, they were written centuries after the events happened. And then in looking at the writings and comparing them, it's quite clear that documents were modified, they were redacted, they were appended. And so it's kind of hard to know, you know, what really was. And so that kind of gives a backdrop. It's actually any wonder any of them survived today, and we'll sort of touch on the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Nag Hammadi library, which were incredibly important discoveries because of how they held the sacred feminine. So just to give you a super macro oversimplified history of humanity, go back 3,000 years, polytheism was alive and well, from the cave dwellers where we have pictures on walls, down through the Egyptian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, all of which were extant with the time of the Jews. Polytheism was the religion of the day. Fast forward 1,000 years to around 2000 BCE, and I just want to make sure BCE is used to refer to before our common era. CE is used to refer to common era. Bible scholars no longer use BC and AD, so you'll hear me refer to BCE or CE. Just want to clarify that. So fast forward to 2000 BCE, henotheism was introduced. Henotheism said, okay, we acknowledge that there are multiple gods, but we're going to choose to only believe in one. So it was sort of this interim step. Fast forward another 1,000 years to 1000 BCE, monotheism was really almost forced upon people, and we'll get into why. So it went from polytheism to a sort of a hybrid model, henotheism to monotheism. Really completely oversimplified human history. So let's start with Abraham. Abraham is probably a name you're familiar with. He lived around 2000 BCE. He is considered, interestingly, not only the father of Judaism, he's considered the father of Christianity and Islam. A lot of people don't really think of him that way. And apparently he was called by God, known as Yahweh back then, anglicized. It translates as Jehovah, a name we sometimes hear today. And he was called to lead his people, who were undefined at that time, into the land of Canaan. So you have Abraham and his descendants going to the land of Canaan, which was the promised land. Interestingly enough, the land of Canaan was a polytheistic community. Who were their gods? The male god El and the female god Asherah. El, which became a word associated sort of as God, we hear even today in songs like The First Noel or Emmanuel, or names like mine, Elizabeth or Elijah. El is God. So Abraham and his descendants lived in the land of Canaan for hundreds of years, immersed in polytheism. They lived there until there was a famine, and then they left and went to Egypt. Sadly, they became enslaved in Egypt. We'll get to that in a minute. But before they left Canaan on their way out to Egypt, apparently an angel appeared to the son of Abraham. He had a son, Jacob, and an angel appeared to him and changed his name to Israel. Jacob, or Israel, had 12 sons. These 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. Hence, where we get the Israelites. They are really the descendants of Abraham. They now have a recognized identity. They have 12 tribes. They get enslaved in Egypt. Fast forward 500 years, Moses, called by Yahweh, to deliver the Israelites from slavery under the Egyptian Empire. Well, guess what? The Egyptian Empire, where they were enslaved for over 400 years, was polytheistic. So there was mixing and matching, believe me, of religion and spirituality at that time. 500 years forward is Solomon. Solomon, again, all these dudes were called by Jehovah or by Yahweh to do things on behalf of his people. I'm just reporting what it's written. I'm not saying it's the truth, okay? So Solomon was called to govern the Israelites. And as their governor, he built in the year 1000 the magnificent Temple of Solomon, the first Jewish temple. It was up on the Temple Mount. It was apparently a magnificent structure. It had an inner chamber called the Holy of Holies, where just the high priest could convene with the god or gods. It had a courtyard where apparently men could be, and an outer courtyard where only women could be. You can have your thoughts on that. But anyway, what was interesting was Solomon had many wives, many foreign wives. And so he was very much influenced by the things they believed in, and was very comfortable with a polytheistic practice at this temple of the Jews. He also housed there the Ark of the Covenant, something you've probably all heard of. And in the Ark were the 2 tablets handed to Moses, the rod of Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother, and a jar of manna, which is what the Jews lived on when they were wandering in the wilderness for 4 years. What's interesting, though, is I always wondered, why was Aaron's rod included in there? Now, Moses apparently wasn't a good spokesman, and Aaron often spoke for him. And apparently, while Moses was up on Mount Sinai getting the tablets from God, what was Aaron doing? Aaron was down at the bottom of the mountain building the golden calf and singing and dancing around it in a polytheistic practice with all the other Jews that were there waiting for Moses. But Aaron's rod gets put in the Ark of the Covenant. So interesting. Let's see, what else? So there's clear evidence that there were 2 deities primarily worshipped at the Temple of Solomon. One was Yahweh, which comes from the Jewish male god. And then who else? Oh my gosh, was Asherah, the Canaanite pagan considered goddess female. These were the 2 primary deities that were being worshipped at Solomon's temple. And in fact, Asherah is specifically mentioned in the book of Kings, which is part of the Hebrew scriptures of the Old Testament. They've also found numerous pottery shards going back to the 8th century that have specific inscriptions on them asking for blessings from Yahweh and his Asherah, his meaning like his consort. So it was very accepted back then. Asherah was known as the goddess of heaven. The name Asherah means to be sacred or to sanctify. And Asherah was associated with the Holy Spirit, embodying the Holy Spirit. And in fact, when you look at the words used for spirit in Hebrew, it's ruach, is feminine. In Aramaic, the other language that Jesus and Mary and others spoke at the time, is ruach, also feminine. And when it evolved to Greek, the word pneuma, where we get pneumonia because it has to do breath or spirit, the word is neutral. The point being that in nowhere in there was it ever male. It was always very feminine. Asherah was also associated with divine wisdom. She was associated with the tree of life, which becomes important when we think of how the narrative got changed. And here's the clincher. She was also associated with the serpent. The serpent at the time when they were worshiping was the symbol of fertility. It was a symbol of creative life force. It was a symbol of transformation in the way a snake sheds its skin in this kind of renewed, and it was a symbol of healing. And you see down to our day with medical symbols, there's a snake often in there. So it was alive and well in the Solomon's Temple. If we fast forward 300 years to the year 722, this is when the Assyrian Empire was alive and well. And the Assyrians, again, were polytheistic, but they came and they destroyed 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. So a huge portion of the Jews were either destroyed or they were dispersed. And they were dispersed within the Assyrian Empire, polytheistic, or elsewhere out of it. There were 2 remaining tribes that survived. It was the tribe of Benjamin, which Mary Magdalene is thought to be descended from. And then there was the tribe of Judah, and that is the direct line of Jesus and his direct lineage to the son of Judah, or the tribe of Judah, is in the Bible in both Matthew and Luke. And in Matthew, his direct lineage is of Joseph. And in Luke, the direct lineage is through his mother, Mary. And you can see how he is name by name connected all the way back. Well, these 2 tribes become very significant. The kingdom of Judah is where they settled in Judea in the 6th century. And that is from Judea that the name Judaism comes and the name Jew comes from. It is from a geographic location. All right, so then things were going well at Solomon's Temple, but there's been, this disbursement of Jews. And then in 621 BCE, something very cataclysmic happened, a complete cultural wipeout. And it was when a group of priests, a minority group of priests known as the Deuteronomists, took control of the temple, and they wiped out anything to do with Asherah, anything to do with the feminine, the altars, the shamanic practices. They were considered shaman at the time, and any notion, idols, figurines, altars, anything, gotten rid of. They instituted this idea that any kind of false idol was bad, and those false idols were mostly feminine. So all feminine symbols removed, massive cultural destruction by the end of the 7th century BCE. And these Deuteronomists, when we talk about the winners get the narrative, the Deuteronomists, were credited with many of the Hebrew prophets and wrote a number of the books in the canon. You probably recall the book of Deuteronomy, but also Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings were all written by these Deuteronomists. So after that big wipeout, then there was another one. Now the Babylonians were the empire, and they were also polytheistic. And so they ruled over the Jews, but they ended up being the ones to actually destroy the temple that had already been kind of compromised by the Deuteronomists. So now there was really no place of central worship, no place of seeing and interacting with the divine feminine. And as a result of all of these empires kind of crushing the Jews and the Deuteronomists, the connection to the divine feminine was lost. The priests actually demoted Asherah from being the heavenly goddess to being the human Eve, and she went from mother goddess to mother of humanity. Eve then got conflated with the whole myth of the fall of humanity. You get introduced the tree and the serpent. Remember, those were symbols that Asherah had around her. So you can see how that whole narrative in Genesis kind of got all mixed up with that. And it was at this time, it is thought, that this systemic persecution and exclusion of women began. Anyone who expressed an interest in the divine feminine was burned or stoned. And so all connection to the sacred on earth really got lost. The only kind of remnant we have today is this idea of Mother Nature. And so here we are 2,500 years later, still fighting to kind of restore the feminine. So I'm about ready to hand it over to Tara. I just want to sort of set you up now after all of that stuff went on. Some of the dispersed Jews quietly settled near the Dead Sea, and they really kept quiet because of all the persecution. They became what were known as the Essenes, Essenes. They were one of three major Jewish sects. There were the Essenes, there were the Pharisees, and there were the Sadducees. But the Essenes were very different from the other two groups. They were far more fluid in their thinking. And it wasn't until the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947 and 1946 in 11 caves that it really became clear that the Dead Sea Scrolls were actually the library of the Essene Jews. And the Dead Sea Scrolls were part of every book of the Hebrew Bible, except for the book of Esther. But these Essenes lived for thousands of generations, and they were connected actually to the Jains of India, who have very similar beliefs, another whole story. But they believed in ritual purity. They believed in asceticism, poverty, peace to the extent where they didn't even like to get angry, communality, they always ate and prayed together. And what became kind of interesting, they valued keeping secrets. And because of that value, that is why we have what we have today, which we're going to talk about mostly in the next webinar. And the other thing they did, which I thought was kind of charming, was they thought it was really important to always keep track of the names of the angels. And so they have written all their names in a lot of their writings. But guess who was Essene? Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and John the Baptizer were all from the Essene community. It's why they knew each other. And so the Essenes taught of an inner spiritual path with a direct relationship to God as the way towards spiritual enlightenment. They did not teach patriarchy. They did not teach a church orthodoxy or hierarchy. Women were equal teachers and leaders based on their spiritual qualifications. They were singularly different among the Jews at this time. And their teachings found their way mostly into what we call now the Gnostic texts, even in the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, and in a group known as the alchemists, where the whole idea of Sophia and divine wisdom got introduced. And oh, guess who they talk about? The alchemists refer to Mary the Jewish. Gosh, I wonder who that is. So very, very interesting. All right, so I'm about to stop. I'm just going to say that the Essenes did not align at all with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were the ones who were kind of behind the Deuteronomists, who were all about monotheism, strict patriarchal teachings and organizations. And they are described extensively in the Bible as the ones who sought to get rid of Jesus, his teachings, and his disciples. I'm going to stop there. Over to you, Teddy.
Thank you, Ellie. We are really excited because that was such an amazing and broad description of what was going on at that time. And so on that note, Maria Teresa Egaña, please give us your passion about what you've taught to many hundreds of women. You're muted.
I'm so delighted with Ellie sharing. My God, really, really, I'm honoring your voice, your knowledge, and the fluency with you share your knowledge. Thank you very much. First of all, my English is very limited, so I'm going to speak very slowly so I can pronounce the best I can. Let's see. Taking from what Eli was sharing, let's move, let's make a trip to this place that is called Galilee or Israel or Judah. This place where the 27 years before Jesus was born, the Roman Empire came and took possession of those communities and took possession of the tradings, of the society, of laws and everything. So all these Jewish communities and were not only mixed with pagans and with what Eli called the Asans, who were also known as impure Jewish. But also came the way of thinking of the Romans, which were patriarchal society and a political way of conducting power. And they were not even a little bit pro-women. So in this area, in this moment of history, Jesus was born and Mary Magdalene too. And they were born in a place where, for example, pagans were very powerful because they were making tradings from Egypt to Israel, and they were bringing culture from Egypt and also from Greek. And this one of the main herencias, Laura?
Heritage.
In heritage that they brought was Artemis. And Artemis became the heiress of Asherah. Artemis became the one who took the place of Asherah in the minds and the psyche of these pagans and also of the impure Jewish or the Assyrians. And this Artemis was a goddess, very powerful, very beautiful. She was the protector of the traders, of every commerce, the fishermen, and all the people who were migrating from one place to another. So it means that Yahweh, the Jewish God, and Artemis were the main one in the divinity concept of all the people who were sharing this community or this life. God, this is the first time I'm speaking about this in English, so I'm finding the words.
You're doing an amazing job.
Oh, thank you very much. So Marie Magdalene was born in a family that has been truly not misunderstood, but was misled along the history. She was born as a family made with Lazarus and Martha. The three of them were sister and brothers, and they had a father that was a very prominent, very important religious man in the Judah, in the Hebrew community, but also as an impure, as an impure Jewish. He was a believer of Artemis. So Marie Magdalene was educated under that conception. She was also an extremely intelligent woman. And Jewish families who belonged to a high standard, high profile families had money and position and power, women had certain privileges that usually were not in the common possession of other women. So she was a well-educated woman who spoke the several languages, who knew about history, geography, mathematics. She knew about many, many things, and she was well known in her community. She was also a woman who inherited money from his father. When her father died, this was also a privilege that was not common for women, but for privileged women. She was in possession of her own financial independence, as well as Martha and Lazarus. So she became a leader herself before knowing Jesus. She was a well-known woman before knowing Jesus. She has never been a prostitute. No, it doesn't matter how many times Christianity history says so. It was not only, and I'm going to jump to 500 years after Jesus and Mary Magdalene, it was not only until 500 years after them that she was named by prostitute by the Pope Gregory the Magnus. Before that, she was never, ever considered a prostitute. So if you see Netflix, please, Netflix is not the new Bible. Please do not believe in Netflix. Believe in history, okay? So we see this woman who was beautiful, young, very powerful, independent, educated, a privileged woman. And she meets this young guy who was a rabbi, also extremely intelligent and very well respected in the Jewish community. He was also a rebellious rabbi. He didn't follow everything that he was ordered to do so. But he offered this community of not only Jewish and impure Jewish, but also pagans, that he offered a new way of conceiving God, a God that had no gender or that had both gender, father and mother. He went back to the origins of Hebrewism, and he went back to the origin of divinity. He brought back divinity. And inherited, he was a descendant of Solomon. Mary Magdalene was a descendant of a royal family, also from the Hebrew community. And they both connected, and they both became a pair of leaders who show a new way of understanding, but also a compassionate, loving God. They never pretended to create another religion. Christianity existed long before Jesus was dead or crucified. Long after Jesus was crucified. At that time, they never pretended to create another religion. So we must understand this, because that means that they were revolutionaries of whatever was existing already. Also, they were talking, and I pay attention, I always talking about both of them, not only Jesus, but both of them. They were talking about a different way of understanding power, politics. They were talking about women's rights. They were talking about leadership in women, in religion, in politics, in society as well. And this was considered revolutionary, an aggression to the Roman Empire, and also to the patriarchs of Judaism. So both of them became a threat to this whole community. Mary Magdalene was a woman that was the head of about 30 other women. Between them, there were several women apostles, or apostles who were women. And few people know that there were not only men apostles, but also women who were apostles. But, and we talk about that, Inquisition erased that truth and only left alive the male apostles. But there were, like Solomon, John Baptist, Baptist's mother, and other women, they were apostles. So Marie Magdalene was not the only one, but she was the leader of all of them. And how do we know this? There, Eli mentioned the Nag Hammadi manuscripts and Gospels, and also the Dead Sea Scrolls. And there are other manuscripts that have been found since 1945 to today. We still are discovering manuscripts that are telling us another story of Mary Magdalene, Jesus, and that moment of history. These manuscripts were prohibited and considered heretical 300 years after Jesus was crucified by Constantine and the first council of Nicaea. And these manuscripts were hidden since then. So you heard when Eli mentioned that the manuscripts that we know of the Old Testaments were intervened, were changed, were written by a group of scribans that were serving a political, patriarchal way of understanding religion and society and politics. But these manuscripts that were written the first and the second century after Jesus' crucifixion, they have never been touched. They have never been changed. They have never been intervened. So there are the first and only manuscripts that are saying a different kind of history that is not serving any politic or any religion after Jesus' crucifixion and after Marie Magdalene move on to another territory, seeking for her safety. So going back to this wonderful couple, we understand that Marie Magdalene is a woman who has a leadership by herself, and that she connected with Jesus, and she creates along with him a new way of understanding women, men, society, and politics. But we all know that he was crucified, and what usually people don't know is that Marie Magdalene had a life of enormous leadership after Jesus was crucified. She was along with other apostles like Peter and James. James was Jesus' brother. And Santiago, I don't know the name Santiago in English, but they were the main apostles that talk about Jesus' message. But Marie Magdalene went along with her brother and sister and about 40 other people, and moved to Egypt and then to what we know now as South France. And over there, they created another church that was 1,000 years later destroyed by the Christian Crusades and the Catholic Inquisition. So people don't know that she was the carrier of the true message of Jesus. So whenever you start reading books like the Gnostic Gospels or the Lost Gospels or the Gospel of Thomas or Marie Magdalene or Philip, then you will see that the message that Jesus and Marie Magdalene give to the world is totally different than the one that we have heard until now. But all this story has been changed over and over again through different moments, beginning with Constantine, who was the emperor at the year 300 after Jesus' crucifixion. And he wanted to transform, to unify the whole Roman Empire. And he did so by calling the patriarchs of the different movement of Christianity. we have to understand that by that time, there were different movements that were trying to understand the message of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And they had lots of discussions between them. There were the Valentines, there were the Arians, and they were all called, years after Jesus, they were called the Gnostic, because they, as Eli mentioned, they believe in God inside each one of us. And they say that the message of Jesus was that every one of us is son, daughter of God. He was not, and he never considered himself the only son of God, nor the divinity in this earth. He always taught, as well as Mary Magdalene, that we were all equal and we were all in the same place under the eyes of God. So they didn't believe in that hierarchy of having popes and main priests, and women cannot do this or that. They believe of that equality. Some women nowadays call them that the first feminist movement, but it's not so. They were never talking about feminism. They were talking about equal right to divinity and to dignity as human beings, that was no difference between one another. So in the councils, Constantine agreed to name Christianity as the main religion, which will stop the killing and the persecution of Christians, and will consider Christianity the main religion of his empire. His mother was a very, very passionate Christian. That's why he chose Christianity. But he never was a Christian. He was baptized few hours before he died. And as a pagan, he was a follower of the sun god. And he asked the patriarchal two things. One, that this new religion had to be a representation, a masquerade of the sun god. And two, that they had to choose between them which movement of Christianity was the winner and was the main representation of the whole movements of Christianity. And the Orthodox Christianity won. And they arranged to kill and make disappear all the other patriarchals, or not patriarchal, head of the other Christians. So that was when it was ordered to destroy all the manuscripts that belonged to Gnosticism, and they were called hereticals. The first time that they were called hereticals. So years of persecution happened until around 500 after Jesus' crucifixion. They disappeared completely. They totally disappeared, and only Orthodox Christianity survived, which means that the Catholic Roman Christianity and the Orthodox Greek Christianity were the main ones. By the year 1000 after Jesus, a new community rose in South France. They were focused on rescuing the original message of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. They were followers of Mary Magdalene. And they created this church that is called the Church of Love. And they accused the Pope, the Catholic Pope, to be corrupt, to be a thief, and to be a liar. So these people, this church in South France, they were they welcome people from many religions, from many kind of beliefs, from different paths, no judgment, as long as they learn to co-live in peace. So they became a place where people was safe. And this was against what Catholic wanted to happen. So by the year 1200 something, the Pope Benedict, the Pope, and the King of France, who was in North France, they made an alliance, and they decided to erase from the earth this church that was called the Cathars. And this happened. It took about almost 200 years to do so, but they did it. And from then on, what the Gregory the Magnus in the year 500 after Christ said about Mary Magdalene being a prostitute, they took that declaration and they made it somehow like a law. And they forced every priest and every Christian follower to repeat that until it became part of the belief in Catholic or Orthodox communities. So Marie Magdalene was not only erased, but she was transformed into a woman that is a prostitute. Here I'm going to make my words. I have no idea why becoming a prostitute is such a bad thing, because prostitutes have their own rights to live and to transform their life into a beautiful, wonderful way of being a woman. And, you know, but it has always been something that sexuality and has been taken away from women. So all of this became what we usually hear at the table, in the movies, in the books, in the way we speak about Marie Magdalene. And that's the way that we understand life. It's the way that women have been seen for years. Remember that Inquisition for almost 800 years persecuted, killed, and tortured women who were sexually free or were with wise women connected with freedom or independence or seeking their own independence, their own words, their own voice. They killed women who were connected with medicine, with ritual for self-transformation. So it was almost 800 years of persecution. So after, let's say 100, at the end of 1800s, feminism start waking up and changing all these teachings and this mindset. And even though it's been over 100 years since that movement began to express about women in a different way, we still are carrying in our blood, in our mind, in our way of thinking, this wrong way of understanding history. So I'm going to stop here because next time we are going to talk about the life of Marie Magdalene after crucifixion. And we are going to understand a bit more what it means. And Laura, I give you the word, and I'm very, very, very
grateful
for your patience with my English.
You were amazing. Your English was impeccable. And Eli, your presentation was fantastic. We have a few more minutes for questions on the incredible presentation that Eli and Tere did. If there is anything you want to ask, please go ahead. If not, I will ask the first question to both of you. How did you become so passionate about this topic? who introduced you and how did you weave in this knowledge into your professional and career to transform women around the world?
Eli, you want to be the first?
If I have to. Anyone who knows me knows that I am not, I don't work in a straight line. You know, I kind of have an insatiable curiosity, but I will say, and I don't talk about this very much, from the time I was a really small girl, I had a very deep spiritual interest. I literally started reading the Bible when I was 5. My grandmother was a Christian Scientist, and she was really deeply spiritual. And while Christian Science kind of scared me when she would take me to their services, she kind of inculcated in me just a really deep respect for the exploration of sacred texts. And so when I met a Bible scholar as a teenager and started studying with them, it just opened up a whole new world. And I will say that, like all of us, I think we kind of want to know answers. You know, why are we here? How did we get here? Where are we going? What happens when you die? What's our purpose? You know, all of that. And I live with those questions every day. But as I said earlier, I've really, first of all, the more I learn, the more I know I have to unlearn all the other stuff I learned. It's just this wild process of unlearning, and I like to call it re-wisdoming of my kind of inner spirit and mind. I love the fact that in the original teachings of Jesus and Mary that we're going to get into next time, they really elevate the idea of the mind as being very closely associated with the spirit. And that just really, really resonates with me. There is something that feels so truthful about these gospels and teachings that we're going to get into, in a way that I was intrigued by the other teachings, you know, the Hebrew scriptures, the Greek scriptures, other sacred texts, but there was always something missing. Something was not right. And the thing that wasn't right was not only the absence of the feminine, but the way the feminine was treated, the way women were treated. I could never, ever sound that down and accept it. And so I am so excited that these texts have been recovered and found and are coming into the light of day. So anyway, that's why I'm here, and I'm all kind of excited again in my life around this topic. Over to you, Tere.
Well, I grew up in a Catholic family, Catholic country, Catholic school. And I never felt connected with those teachings. But I remember when I was 15, I was very mala conducta.
Very bad behaved, very bad.
Very bad behaved in school. And
you were a rebel.
Yes, and they usually asked me to leave the classroom. You know, they were saying out. And when one of those days, I went into the chapel, and I found the Bible, and I started reading. You know, and I found information like Jesus had brothers and sisters, and I said, but his mother is supposed to be a virgin. How come he had lots of brothers and sisters? And then start seeking and seeking. And I found out there was another story. So after I was asked forever to leave the school, not the classroom, but the school, I felt free to investigate. And when I went to school, to university, I was investigating different kind of books. It was very difficult at that time to find information. Everything was like hidden. And so I talked to priestess that were rebellious too. I talked to rabbis. I talked to ex-priests and ex-rabbis who were, by their freedom, they could talk to me about tell me about many information it wasn't found in books. And I started growing this passion about Mary Magdalene. And I felt very much connected to her. So for many, many, many years, I have been tracking books and information, and archaeologists, historians, people from Harvard University like Elaine Pagels or Karen King, people like Hakobovich, Hinka Hakobovich. I mean, there are many people who are investigating in a very, very deep way, and I'm part of this new movement in history. So for me, it has always been in me to get to know not only Mary Magdalene, but women, how women has been erased from history. Because when I found out the other story of Mary Magdalene, I started to understand that we women have another story that hasn't been told in history. So I became a passionate investigator or researcher of this other story, and that's what my life has become of. That's why I'm totally connected and focused on reveal this other story. And that's about it. That's about it.
Thank you. And we are about to close this webinar, but I have to thank you, especially the two of you, because you have inspired me. And my first knowledge as a Catholic from Argentina on all this came when I read the popular book, Da Vinci Code of Dan Brown. And I always thought this is incredible. And then I read The Name of the Rose, another book by Umberto Eco that mentioned that. And suddenly I started to investigate and read. But the key thing here is that the joy that gives me of being able to share this knowledge with so many people is that there is an incredible light of growth for every woman and man to understand that for 2,000 years, the rules of the game were power and oppression, mostly of women. And now with the teaching of the religion of love of Mary Magdalene, one can see that there's a lot of relationships between what they taught, what the Buddhists say, and other religions, like Eli said, the India Hindu religions. So on that note, I want to thank you, and I do hope you can come to our next webinar that is on the last Wednesday at the same time of June, and it's June 27th, and the title is Ministry of Mary Magdalene After the Crucifixion. And remember, Mary Magdalene is the one that has been named the most times in the Bible. And why was it she called a prostitute? There will be a lot of that information. Yes. What happened? Mm-hmm. And if both of you want to give a little glimpse of what's going to happen the next webinar, would be great. And then we'll close for the next week.
Well, first, we have people here who are writing beautiful things. Thank you, Nancy and Giovanna and Caroline and Daniela and Sonia Patricia and Giovanna. Yes, there is a connection between Jesus and Marie Magdalene's teachings with certain other teachings from the Far East. I don't know about Japan, but yes, from other cultures, yes, for sure. Now, next month, we're going to be talking about the importance of understanding that reading the manuscripts and the Gospels is not literally. We have to understand their teachings in a different way. There are messages that are hidden, that are like behind the words that we read. And that's how, that is what made crucial that Marie Magdalene message has to be understood in the right way, as well as Jesus' message, because it was the same. And we're going to be talking about her journey through the desert, Egypt, and then the sea until she got to the Gallia, which is today South France. It was the province of the Roman Empire. And over there, she made a life that is extremely important and that some people don't know. We're also going to be talking about the children she was carrying in her womb, and what happened to them. And also we will be talking about how her leadership is influencing our mindset today.
And I'm going to further whet your appetite by saying that there have only been 3 codex manuscripts discovered, all written around the 2nd century, that are the Gospel of Mary. They're all fragments, and all 3 are missing the same pages.
Right.
Might
right.
be kind of interesting. Further, however, another manuscript has been discovered called the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. And for the first time, we are able to see what those missing pages say and why they mysteriously were taken out of the other things that were discovered. It is fascinating. So hopefully you'll join us. We're going to break it all down and get really into it. I'm really excited because it is mind-blowing what's contained in this complete manuscript of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Right. It's wonderful. Wonderful.
There you go. Join us next time.
It's mind blowing, and it's a change, a complete change of our hearts. We will start understanding women in a complete different way. And that's so important for our leadership today. So thank you, Laura, for creating this space. And Eli, I'm so, I have become a fan of yours.
Likewise. You know I love you.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you all for participating. This has been so fantastic. I'm looking forward to see you next month. And all the information, the recording of this webinar, if you want to revise it and re-listen to it or send it to a friend, will be on our website, womenforsolutions.com. On that note, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody.